Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Melissa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey there, Rockstar listeners. You're in for a treat today. We are doing a little bit of a different show. Instead of talking to another amazing chiropractor or health professional, I have got an amazing financial planner with me and someone specifically who works with chiropractors and health professionals. So I thought this would be an interesting conversation because part of my goal in helping you create your own Rockstar Doctor life is knowing how to obviously build a great practice, save expenses, monitor your overhead, all that great stuff. But we also want to know as docs, what are some of the things that we could be doing to maximize our profits and keep more of our money? And I know that our guest today is an expert in some of these things. So welcome to the show, Galen.
Thank you. I'm excited to be chatting with the rock star for a little bit here.
So I got to meet you at our one-day intensive event in Toronto last summer with a laptop lifestyle. And you had some really interesting perspectives on money. And I could see your passion, your excitement for what the kind of work you're doing. And that is always something that draws me right in. So before we jump into some of your tips for doctors, I'd love to hear how you became a financial planner. And also, how did you decide to start working with doctors specifically?
Yeah. So great question. How did I start? You know, I feel like for a lot of people, it's an accidental career. And for me, it certainly was. So my background is in education. I taught overseas for 10 years, adult and grade 5. I got my master's in education teaching degree. My wife and I moved to Canada. I'm originally from the States, but now I have 3 passports, one of which is Canadian, which I got like a year ago. Woot woot. And we moved up here.
Yeah.
And she's a chemical engineer. I'm a teacher. I'm like, I can teach anywhere. I've got my master's. I've got all this experience. I'm bilingual, English, Spanish, which doesn't really help in Canada that much, but whatever. And we
you
moved
gotta
up
learn
here.
French.
I know. And I moved up here and they're like, yep, no jobs, especially in Eastern Ontario. And they're like, you're going to have to start at the bottom of the totem pole. And it was a very humbling experience. Stayed home with my kids for a couple years. And finally, my wife hated her job. And it was a situation where I would drive her to work in the morning. And the closer we got, the quieter she got. And I would see her starting to like breathe, like really shallow. And I wouldn't ask her how she was doing because I knew she'd start crying before she got out of the car because she hated her job so much. And she didn't want to have her eyes all red going into work. And I was like, this has to change. So I couldn't teach. We didn't really want to move because we had family moving from Venezuela to Canada to live near us. And my advisor was like, Galen, I think you'd be a good advisor. And I said, hell no. I said, I don't want to manage other people's money. I don't want to sell insurance. I was like, I don't want to be the guy at the party that no one wants to talk to. And I wasn't 100% sure at the time whether it was an ethical, like a job that would combine with my ethical beliefs, my spiritual beliefs. And so I spent 8 months grilling them about the job. And they said, and I talked to people that knew me and people were like, Galen, I think you do a really good job of this. So after 8 months of grilling them, I said, let's go for it. And I ended up loving it and really connecting with, at the end of the day, adding significant amounts of value to people's lives around a subject which I used to be completely confused about because there's all these acronyms and all these things. And I used to like pick up a magazine and think I knew what I should do. And then I'd pick up a magazine a month later and I felt like it was telling me to do the exact opposite of the thing the last one told me. And so I've taken my master's and I've combined it with financial planning. And I am basically like probably one of the best financial advisors at explaining complex concepts to people in plain English that everyone can understand.
Oh, you got me sold. And so how did you go from then becoming a financial planner to then really wanting to focusing your interests and your client base on chiropractors and health professionals?
Yeah. So what that was an interesting one. So in the sense, so when I started as an advisor, they basically are like, you just have to meet with everyone and anyone that's willing to meet with you in the beginning. And the thing is like, and I feel like I have a lot of empathy for chiropractors in the healthcare world. And I really do mean empathy in the sense that I went to school and I learned so I went to become an advisor. I learned all this stuff and I was like, this is easy. Like I've learned all this stuff, how I can help people. Like everyone's going to be like knocking on my door to get my advice because I know how to help them in ways that like are not common knowledge. And I started and it's like, no, I felt like I had to convince people to sit down with me. And I was like, this is weird. And I had to fight for my clients. Like I didn't just have clients landing in my lap. Like I've taught, my chiropractor clients have told me, they're like, Galen, sometimes you feel like, you know, oh, I'm just going to become a chiropractor. I'm going to hang up my shingle and I'm going to have this flood of clients, which we all know is not the case at all. That's part of what you help people with.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of empathy in that situation, knowing all this stuff that can help people, but yet having people, there's a lot of negative connotations around my industry out there. If you pick up a newspaper today, like the Globe and Mail, there may be an article in there that's talking about why you shouldn't trust financial advisors. So the reason I started working with doctors in part was my dad's a doctor, and I grew up watching him just like he's a doctor, but at one point in time, someone asked me, what does your dad do? And I said, oh, he's in construction. And my dad looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said that because as a kid, after work, we would go to his practice where he was like rebuilding his practice and like putting up walls. And he had a hard hat on. And then he and his friends were building like an investment property. And so I thought that's what my dad did. And he seemed to know a lot about markets. So at the end of the day, what I decided was I'm going to work with doctors and I'm going to free healers up to heal people. Like take away as much of their money concerns as humanly possible so they can free up to do the thing that they wanted to do. I asked doctors, why did you go into medicine? And they usually say, to impact the lives of others because they had their own experience. Like people say, a chiropractor changed my life when I was a kid and I decided I want to do the same thing. I've yet to meet someone, or maybe I just don't attract that population. I've yet to meet someone who says, oh, I became a chiropractor because I really wanted to go into business. I wanted to become an expert at corporate taxation. I wanted to, really understand the markets. Like I wanted to do all that. Like, no one ever says that to me. So, and the last thing I'll say about doctors is usually a lot of times I meet doctors and it's almost like they have all the puzzle pieces, but they're just put together all wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I generally find that I can have a significant positive impact in a quick time frame because I'm kind of an impatient guy. And when I was starting to do planning, I'd meet people and oftentimes it was like, well, Galen, I can't do this because, I can only do, just like $20 a month into some savings and I can only do this. I'm not ready to do that. Whereas with doctors on average, when I get in front of them, I figure out where they want to be. I show them how to get there. Usually they're able to take some action. And then over time, if they can't do everything all at once, usually within a couple of years, they're pretty much where they should be on track. So that's another thing. I like adding significant value.
Well, I think it's smart. We do this as chiropractors. I know that I have my ideal demographic within my practice. I know the kind of people who are really great fit for the kind of care that I deliver and are for the culture that's in my practice. In online business, we talk about really getting to know your avatar, your client, so that you can really meet their needs. So I think it's really smart to create a niche and to then be able to tailor your expertise to that client base. So, you're working with health professionals now. And what are some of the things that you find are oh God, there's so many questions I want to ask you. What are some of the key things that you observe are deficient in most chiropractors' financial setup?
Yeah. Okay. So, wow, all right, good question. So one of the big things that's challenging for healthcare professionals, chiropractors, is most of the financial advice that's out there was created by employees for other employees. So a lot of people are out there talking about, oh, should I save into this account or that account? Like, I'll just use the Canadian example, TFSA versus RSP. It's probably like one of the most Googled things in Canadian finance. For a chiropractor, like there are questions they should be asking way before that. Like chiropractors and most healthcare professionals, they have to decide even how to pay themselves. Like, how much should I pay myself as a salary? How much should I leave inside of my corporation? And so like most of the stuff that's out there is written for people who are earning a salary, like a fixed salary. And what should they do with, they should budget and they should have this extra money and all this stuff. Whereas with a chiropractor, especially when they have the corporation, there's all these questions they should be asking before that question. Like basically one of the big things I help people figure out is how much should they leave inside of their corporation? How much should they take out? And where should they put it all? So that someday they can flip a switch and they can only keep working if they truly want to, like not because they need the money. And that's why I help my clients figure out, like, when is that day? We get it with the closest, approximation as possible. Say, when is that day when you'll flip a switch and say, I'm only working because I truly want to, not because I absolutely have to. And so many doctors I meet, the first thing they say is, I'm terrified of doing locums in my 70s because I made bad financial decisions and I am unable to retire. And that's the biggest one. I have a few more, but that's the biggest.
So then if there was to continue that conversation, so is there a solution or a remedy to that situation that you find yourself giving out consistently?
Yeah. So really one of the things that
I'm sure there's a few. Sorry. I know that the work that you do is large with people, but if we were to just try to give listeners today some kind of nutshell or some kind of, tips that they can actually maybe start to implement.
Absolutely. So I'd say one of the biggest things is I think that people aren't asking the right questions and they're not being asked the right questions. So one of my big things is I help people get really clear on their goals, like where they want to be. And I get people to really be attached to that goal or committed to that goal to the extent that other things are going to start to fall into place. So I'll just say, like, the way that it's done normally, I believe, is a bit backwards, where people say, how much do you make? How much do you spend? What's left over? And what are we going to do with it? It's traditional budgeting. I don't really believe in that type of budgeting. I don't really see, like, if you're a superstar budgeter and you love doing that, go for it. But most of my clients don't do that. And most people get stuck at that point because they're like, oh, I don't know how to do a budget. I'm like, most people don't. Like, I can think of like 2 clients that have like a consistent budget. Most of them don't. And so then I work my way backwards to that goal. And so, like, one of the big things, and like this is like the biggest thing I've learned, is this one question that helps people get really clear on what they want. And if it's okay with you, I will ask you that question so we can
Okay.
unfold live. Well, yeah.
All right, let's do it. You said in there in our pre-chat, you thought I was fearless. So I guess I have to live up to that right now.
You did talk about being fearless in Toronto, and I was like, you rock star fearless. And what I'll say, the last thing I'll say before I ask the question is, people will say, what makes you different than other advisors? And most people will say things like, which is kind of true in my case. I mean, it is true in my case in the sense of I have a better holistic approach to financial planning than most. I understand corporations better than most. I spent years and years and hundreds of meetings figuring out how corporations work in Canada. But that's a very technical side. And at the end of the day, what really makes me different is the questions I ask. So,
all right, let's do it.
So, Melissa.
Yes.
Today is, let's just say we're September 2019. If we were sitting down 3 years from today, so 2022.
Okay.
We're sitting down and you were looking back at the time that had transpired between today and that day. What would have to have had happen in your personal and professional life for you to feel like you'd made excellent progress?
Oh gosh, I always go back to joy. Joy and health being one of my top values. I would want to look at, am I healthy? Am I living a life that feels purposeful? And are my kids, where are my kids at? So 3 years from now, I'm going to have, oh my God, a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. So what would I need to feel like I was doing now? So what was the question again?
So looking back, fast forwarding 3 years, looking back, what would have to have happened in your personal and professional life for you to make you feel like you'd had good to excellent progress?
I do think that I want to see progress and expand. I don't like the word expansion. I would want to see just progress and consistent evolution. I like transformations, right? I like watching my clients transform the people in my practice transform their health. And I like transformations with my clients. I don't want to transform my life personally, but I would like to keep evolving. So I would want to see my health continue to get better. My relationships continue to feel richer and more rewarding. All of my relationships, right? I would want to think my financial health continues to increase and grow. I don't want to go backwards, right? And that's what my tattoo, okay, listeners, we're doing this a video as well. If you've seen my tattoo, my arrow on my arm, I always think that life goes forward. So I don't ever want to go backwards. I don't want to, I know sometimes we can't prevent some of the things that happen to us in our lives and they feel like you're going backwards, but I always want to feel like I'm moving forward. So I would say 3 years from now, I'd want to feel like I have more, if we're talking money, I'd want to have more money than I have now. I'd want everyone to be healthier, happy. And yeah, my practice, probably some growth. Who doesn't want to grow in their business? I don't want to double my practice, but definitely some consistent growth within my consulting business.
Very cool.
Was that the kind of answer, like the direction that you were looking?
Yeah, everything. Okay. There's no wrong answer to that question.
Okay.
And when it comes to, I'll ask you one follow-up question. What would it mean to you, or what would be the impact of you having, like you said, you wanted some growth? So what I heard was health, joy, family, relationships, moving forward, hence the arrow tattoo, growth, expansion. So to dial into the money side of things, what would it mean for you? What would be available to you by having more money? Like what would specifically, how would you be able to see that in action?
I just think I'm a single mom. So for me, it comes down to ease in providing things, but I'm also not attached to needing and having to hustle really hard and grind really hard to make more, because I really have everything that I need right now. And I've been at different times in my life as a mom where I've been pushing, thinking I got to do more for my kids, And I'm like, my kids have everything they need. They are not going without anything. And the biggest thing that they need is me and my presence in their life. So I don't know if that's a typical answer or if, cause you do work with, people with money. No, but I don't feel like I'm not driven by material gain.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm driven by purpose and passion and health. And and also probably Galen, to be very honest, because I've worked with so many doctors and I've seen so many doctors, and listeners, many of you know, we have the new Simple Practice program. I have doctors who are $1 million practices that are not happy. They are feeling burnt out, overwhelmed. Their relationships are shit and they want a different way. And so I know very well that money doesn't buy happiness. Money can give you a lot of ease and freedom. And I like that piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
But it doesn't define me. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. And like that. So then one of the last things you were talking about was, you don't want to be hustling. You don't want to be grinding. You've simplified your life. Your kids have what they want. So there's not like this huge need of like, oh, I need X, Y, Z more. And so when I would dial into the money side of things, it would simply be, and we won't do this now because it would take a little bit longer, but it would be just like, what does that look like? Like what kind of money needs to be coming in so that you don't feel like you have to hustle and grind, so that you feel like it's easy. And it seems like you've achieved that to a certain extent. And then it would be, and then after we figured out that, like, what does that look like? We do a little bit more visualization. You assign your own unique name to that goal. And then we look at all the barriers that could come up that keep you from getting there. The things that could keep you from being able, like what could happen in your life that would force you to hustle and grind? Is there things we can do to protect against that? And then like, so that you don't have to worry about it. And you're just going to be like quite confident that you're going to reach that goal. And I mean, certainly like, that's what I do hear a lot of people say, like, they just want to stop, like, they don't want to have to worry about it. Like, I don't work with a lot of people who, anytime that someone tells me, Galen, I want, even if the very few people that give me an actual number right off the bat and say, oh, Galen, I need to have X, millions of dollars. I always go back to why. Why do you need that much money? What's that going to provide you? And certainly if someone thinks that they're going to get something that they don't have now from a sense of feeling by having that money, like I look at that very closely to say, like, a lot of people, it's like a carrot on the end of the stick that they're just chasing their whole life and saying, oh, when I have $1 million, I'll have enough. Oh, never mind. When I have 2 million, I'll have enough. Never mind. When I have 5 million, I'll have enough. And so I look at, yes, there's that goal, but then also how do you feel, confident and complete and whole and like celebrating all the way to that goal, rather than, oh, I'm not going to be happy until I hit that goal. Because for humans, it's very hard to forego an immediate gain for a future potential gain. Very difficult. So if all people are thinking is, oh, someday I'll be happy because I've reached this financial goal, I bring it back to the day-to-day of how can you celebrate every step towards that goal and celebrate the things in your life that maybe have nothing to do with that specific goal, like gratitude.
Well, I like that you help people get anchored to their why. Why does it all matter? Right. And I think there's not enough talk about that sometimes. And people, I know that with my clients, they've done some of the exercises I've given them and it's like, oh, I've never really thought about that. I'm like, well, okay. So it's like you're focusing on the chasing. And I was there too, chasing. I thought if I had this big practice with this big team, I was going to be happy. And I started getting there. I'm like, I'm not happy doing this. I want to be a chiropractor. And these are the things I love to do. And how do I do more of this and not any of this shit that I don't want to do? So getting clear on the lifestyle that you want is really key, and what your why is as a person, because I think it's a foundation for everything else. It's interesting that you bring that into financial planning for people.
I do. And one of the reasons I do is because I've just seen it just like you have. I mean, like I know doctors who are retired, who have millions of dollars, and they still don't feel like, they're fearful of the future, which I also work with people on. Like if you're inherently fearful of the future, it's very hard to feel happy about any money, because it's like, am I still going to have this in 10 years? Am I going to lose it? Like there's all these fears. And so that's one of the reasons why I dialed back a bit a few years ago, because I started saying like, well, I can kind of, if someone gives me a goal, there's certain things I can help them achieve that goal from a numbers perspective. But what I really didn't like was, the idea that someone would get to that goal and not get what they wanted. So I'll just use an analogy. The way I look at it is, it's kind of like a road trip. So imagine I'm helping someone plan a road trip, and they're hopping in their car in Toronto. And I'm like, okay, where are you headed? And they're like, oh, we really want to go see the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's figure it out. Let's map out the route, blah, blah, blah. How much gas do you need? All that stuff. Then they get to the Grand Canyon and they're like, oh, where's that big, all those 4 heads of presidents, like in the mountain? Where is that? And I'm like, oh, that's the wrong place. Or they get there and they're like, oh, where's the Golden Gate? I'm like, oh, that's the wrong place. Or like, where's the, you know, whatever, the Victoria Harbor, I don't know. Like, and they're like, oh, like, shoot. And I think that happens with a lot of people in a lot of areas of life, but certainly in finance, where it's like, oh, I think I want to get to this place. But then when they get there, it doesn't actually look like they thought it would, or they're not getting what they thought they would. And I just really thought I'd be doing a disservice to my clients if I just let them keep thinking that without actually challenging it, or at least like having them think about it. Like a lot of people, you know, some of my younger clients, like they're really big on home ownership, and I really dial into like, what is it that you want and why? And if they still want it at the end of that exercise, it's perfectly fine. But at least like do that exercise to really figure it out, because a lot of people think they're going to get something that they're actually not going to get.
Or again, like we said a few minutes ago, they think that what they want, what they're chasing is going to make them happy. And then they realize they get there and it's like, yeah, this isn't what I expected.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. It's making me think of the one of the books that we have that downloads everyone is, if you haven't grabbed this yet and done this exercise, you should really do it, because it's the Create Your Own Rocket Doctor Life workbook. And I've had so many docs take that and use it and tell me, you know, I can't believe I never thought about this. And it basically, what's similar to our conversation here is it's like thinking about your why and your purpose in this world as a healthcare professional, thinking about who you are and what are your unique gifts and strengths, but what are also your values. And then the third piece is thinking about what kind of lifestyle do you want? And then taking all that information and then reverse engineering, like where should you fit in a chiropractic practice? Should you do locums? Should you do research? Should you own your own practice? Should you be an associate? Like all of those are perfectly great options once you really get clear on what you want. And I think a lot of docs have gone to, this is what I'm going to do, but they stop and actually don't think about the process getting there and if it's going to make them happy. Where you're saying too, if you think about what you want and then reverse engineer the financial picture to get you there.
Absolutely. And this actually happened to me recently, which I luckily was able to kind of get through and work my way through is, so I got my certified financial planner designation over the last 18 months. And there was a real lull in my business because it was like, I did it as fast as you can. Like I was like ripping off a Band-Aid because I was like, I'm never going to finish this thing if I don't just get into it. And then as I was doing it, I kind of saw other opportunities like, you know, I have a funnel for a productivity journal I wrote, and I'm seeing how I could maybe, and I mean, I know a lot of people in that space, the digital online marketing space, who make really good money. You know, I was starting to see how I could potentially do the same thing. And I was like, oh man, does this financial advice thing still make sense for me? And luckily I picked up a book by my favorite financial advisor, Nick Murray, who basically like on page 2 of this book about how to become a, you know, an even better financial advisor was, if you're not connected to a mission, you're not going to succeed. And it hit me that I was disconnected from my mission because I was thinking, well, there's these other things out there where I could probably make more money and it would probably be easier to a certain extent. And I probably wouldn't have to worry about, you know, like I carry $5 million of E&O coverage because that's the world. Like I'm pretty sure we have to carry at least 2. And I carry 5 just because of like the nature of the business I do. And I've never had any issues, but like, that's the nature of our business is like people can get sued for massive amounts of money. I remember thinking, man, these guys like selling these online marketing courses, like, I don't know if they get sued. And I see the kind of money they're making. And so starting to get disconnected. And it's because I had lost, you know, my true north, which was teaching people, helping people, you know, seeing people succeed, seeing people sleep better at night. Like my favorite thing in the world, like I get like legit high when people say I sleep better at night now that I've got a plan in place, thanks to you. And that happens consistently where I meet someone who's got a bit of a mess and then they have a plan and they're happy. And so so I did that for my own life. Like I went from having lost sight of my mission and I was a little bit disconnected from my superpower, which is teaching. I wasn't finding as many opportunities to teach in my world as I had been. And yeah, luckily I picked up this book, read the first 5 pages, and it like re-solidified me back. And so I'm back stronger than ever with all sorts of things in the teaching financial advice space.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I'm looking at my notes here and I had written down, like, you know, it seems to me like, you know, from being a teacher and then going to financial planning, like you have been able to hybrid, you know, combine those 2 passions into one. I can hear your passion and your excitement for what you're talking about. So if you were to think about some of your clients, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about here, but I want to try to see if we can give listeners something practical. Like, is there something that you would say, everyone start doing this today and it's going to be better for you tomorrow?
Wow. Everyone do this thing. Okay. So let's see. So, I mean, one of the big things I really encourage people to do is meet with someone who has experience in this world, because so here's the thing, like I am on a mission to combat what I consider to be double financial advice. And so in Canada, we have the double double. It's a yummy coffee. You drive up to the drive-through window, you ask for a double double, they hand it to you. They don't ask you any questions. You know, they don't say like, well, you know, should you be having caffeine or should you be having all this cream and sugar, like, or not? Not their role, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if they went to someone who's like maybe a dietitian or a nutritionist and they'd be like, oh, well, you've got like this tachycardia problem, maybe you shouldn't be having all this caffeine, or you're trying to lose some weight, maybe all this cream and sugar isn't the right idea. So I guess that's the, you know, I'll think of something more concrete in a second, I'm sure.
That's
but
okay.
For now, it's like that thing of like, you know, ask yourself, like if you are getting it, so if you're not getting advice and you need it, go out and find it. If you are getting advice, ask yourself, do you feel like you're getting like good quality, like holistic advice, or is it double advice? Or like I tell people, like there's like a lot of signs that I tell people to look out for in a financial advisor.
Okay, this is a good one.
One of the biggest things I tell people to look out for is if they take orders from you. And it might sound kind of strange, but clients come up to me and they're like, Galen, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, okay, why? And they tell me why. And I'm like, that's not a good reason to do this thing. Like you read something in a book somewhere, or someone said something at the water cooler, and now you think you need to change your course. And that's the role of a good advisor, is to talk people out of doing stuff that's going to torpedo their plan. So and a lot of advisors take orders because like we're terrified of losing a client, right? Like, oh, I just should do what this client says because they're my client. And be like, no, like I get clients every time there's a market crash, or not, hasn't been like a real crash in the last long time. But, you know, a couple of weeks ago, there was this whole thing about the States and this thing, and like, there's going to be a recession. And I had clients calling me like, Galen, I want to change things. And I was like, absolutely not. I was like, we do not change in times of crisis. This is emotionally driven. This doesn't make sense. And by the time there was like a little bit of a back and forth of like, are you sure, Galen? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. Like Roy, what's his name? Roy Rogers? I think Will Rogers said the four most dangerous words in investing are, this time it's different. It's never different. Like it's always the same cycles. And like, and really what people, so that's one of the things, is like have someone like by your side or some community that's going to help you from making like really bad decisions. So that's what I would say is like, if you're getting advice, really take a look at it and see if you think it's good advice. Like like look out for those signs of if they're just taking orders from you, or if they're measuring the value by higher rate of return. Like that's how a lot of advisors try to sell their services. Like, oh, I'm going to make you more money than the next guy. And it's like, well, it's not always about what you make. It's about what you get to keep. Because as you know, a lot of taxes, a lot of opportunities to lose money to taxes in Canada and the States. And so that's why I look at it with my clients. I'm like, you know, I believe in taxes. I understand why we pay taxes, but I don't believe in paying voluntary taxes. I believe that if you know, instead of paying voluntary taxes, give it to a charity that you care about. Like, don't give it to the government, because like you have no choices with how they spend it. Whereas with a charity, you do. I guess that's the first piece of advice I would give, even though it's not super concrete.
No, it's okay. It's a complex situation. I mean, and everyone has their own financial matters, right? And I agree with you. This isn't why you would hire a coach for other parts of your life. And I think it's a gap. Now, I heard something recently. It was on a really successful podcast. Actually, I think it was Amy Porterfield's podcast. Okay. And she was talking about things that she wished she had done earlier in her career. And one of them, the tip she gave, was hiring a financial planner. She's like, I always thought it should be when I was making serious bank that I was going to need advice. And I realize now that in my early days when I wasn't making very much money, if I had hired someone at that point, then I would probably be further ahead than I was. So I guess what I'm trying to get from you is like, you know, what are the things that we talked about, like goal setting and trying to connect with, you know, your lifestyle design. We've talked about maybe something to watch out for when you're trying to work with someone, but is there any advice that you find yourself giving out at dinner parties? Like anything that you find like people are picking your brain at constantly, and something that you feel like is a no brainer that maybe some of us would think, yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say on the side of advice, so one of the interesting things I found, and another reason why I gravitated towards doctors, was there was very little literature out there specifically for doctors and finances. Like it took me years to compile like what I have as far as knowledge. And this actually hit home not too long ago, where actually it was at Dr. Ed's event. Where we met, where you and I met, there was a doctor there that was like, we were kind of talking, and they were asking me like very specific questions. Again, should I do an individual pension plan? Should I do corporately held life insurance? Should I do this? Should I do that? I was trying to answer his question, and he said, you know, Galen, you should really read this book. And he told me this book that's a Canadian book about Canadian finance. I said, okay, cool, I'll read it. He told me to read it. I read it. It had zero advice for doctors. Like almost none of the advice there applied to doctors. And I was like, wow, like what about this book? Like I found it fascinating, that someone liked a book that actually had zero to do with their situation. So concrete, what I would say is look up, like one of the big things that doctors can do is they can actually save taxes inside of their corporation. And so I ask people, why did you incorporate? And they say, to save taxes. And I say, okay, let's figure out if you're actually even saving taxes, because it's not like this automatic thing that you do save taxes just because you incorporate. Like if a doctor spends everything they make, you're probably not saving taxes, you know, if you don't save anything inside of the corporation. So what I would say from a concrete angle is probably just like research the different options for saving inside of a corporation towards future goals. And, you know, there's like, these are highly I shouldn't say highly complex, but like individual pension plans. Like that's what a lot of doctors tell me is like, oh, I wish I had a pension. And pension is a thing where you retire and you still make money. And it's like, sounds good. You don't get one as a doctor. They don't exist for doctors. You have to make your own. Right. So that's what I would say is like, and that's my videos. I have a series of videos. It's a Canadian whiteboard finance. And I have a series of bootcamp videos that are just for Canadian doctors. Some of the principles apply in the States, but sorry, my fellow Americans, most of them are for Canadians. So it is figure out whether you're actually saving those, like being efficient, because a corporation, like if your financial plan, if your financial well-being is like a ship, and a corporation can be like a sail that speeds it up like on its journey, or an anchor that slows it down. And I've seen both.
Well, and my question to you is also like, you know, not all doctors are incorporated. So is there, I mean, that's another whole conversation of should you or shouldn't you, but there would be different advice that you would give to people who are not incorporated, I would gather.
Absolutely. So with non-corporate, like people who aren't incorporated, yeah, certainly there's it's a little bit more simple, I'd say, in most cases from the financial side, because the corporation is like this extra thing that adds, like, I would say it takes the complexity from, like, you know, if you said, oh, the average person has like 3-4 options, once you have a corporation, it's like you have 10, or like, so to speak. So for someone who's wondering whether they should incorporate, I mean, like, are you spending everything you make? Are you saving it? Do you have a lot of overhead expenses, you know, that a corporation could pay for? Do you have a spouse that's helping you in your business, or children that are helping in your business? Those are big signs of wanting to incorporate. But I always recommend people sit down and do the math with an accountant and a financial planner before doing it, because it doesn't always make sense. And sometimes people do it and they try to pay for things that the corporation shouldn't pay for and start getting in a little bit of trouble. Like, oh, I've got this income property. It's like, you have to see whether that's, you know, you have to make sure it's okay, because it might not be, and you don't want to get in trouble over that.
Yeah. There's so many different things we can continue to keep talking about, but I want to respect your time and certainly give listeners a chance to connect with you further. Tell us a little bit about your bootcamp. Yeah.
So I created the bootcamp inspired by the Friday all-in-one session where you and I met, and people were encouraged to set up, create something. And so,
hey, that's really great. Sorry. Are you saying that you created that since that event?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
that's
of
awesome.
that event, since that
that's
event.
Awesome.
And I remember, I think I was talking to you, and because I was like, oh, do you think this is going to work, everyone? And you're like, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Like, why don't you just launch it? And I'm like,
fail forward would be what I would say.
Fail forward. And I said, well, I don't know if it's going to work. And you're like, well, how are you ever going to know? And I was like, okay, fine. So
I really said that. I said some good things, I guess, at that event.
You said some really great things. Yeah, for sure. I was very impressed by everything there. Yeah. So the bootcamp, so what I've created is the 15-minute guide to doctors in retirement. So it's kind of like the top 3 things that they should have taught you in school but didn't around money. And it's a series of videos, because I love whiteboards. Like, I can't help it. So my YouTube channel is Canadian Whiteboard Finance. My Instagram is Canadian Whiteboard Finance. And so if you go to the URL, the website, galenhelpsdocs.com. So GALEN, that's how you spell my name, helpsdocs.com. You can log in, get your access to the financial bootcamp series of videos that takes people through my planning process. Yeah, because really at the end of the day, like, what I like helping people do is identify those goals. And I look at it as like a tree. So like, if you think of a tree, the goals are kind of like on the tips of the branches where the leaves are, and you figure out where those are and like what the tree has to grow to. You figure out how to grow to that point, but then also what are the roots, like, because a lot of people just focus on the growth and they don't look at what could potentially go sideways. There's a lot of things can go sideways. What could potentially go sideways, and how to protect against those things. I find that a lot of people have like some of the things in place, but not usually all of them. And so it's like, create the tree with the deep roots so that you can, like a child who is carefree of money, swing on the branches of your financial plan. And that's what the bootcamp is all about.
That sounds awesome. I mean, I don't know about you listeners, but I'm going to go and check that out as soon as we finish this recording. So thanks for dropping that value with us today and for everything else that you shared. I like your approach. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. And there's certainly some parallels to your life and redesigning your life and simplifying things, that a lot of doctors are dealing with as well. So thanks for your time today. Any final thoughts that you have for our listeners, for chiropractors who might be listening?
Yeah, the final thought I have is a client told me about a year ago. It was the first time I'd ever heard this, but I think almost everyone feels it. And they said to me, Galen, I would rather walk around naked than let you look at my bank account. And money is one of those things that's taboo. Another client of mine, I use this example. It's kind of like everyone has like a disorder with it. Like everyone has some level and they don't want to talk about it. It's like being sick, but you can't talk about it. And so she said, and I'm going to use this graphic example, but it's kind of like having explosive diarrhea. And it's like, even when you go to your doctor, you don't really want to tell them that's what you're dealing with, but you kind of have to. So that's what I'd say is like anyone who's concerned about meeting with someone, it's kind of like the patients you have that like, it's like, oh, I don't want to go to the doctor to find out if I'm sick or not. I just encourage people to take a step if they haven't taken a step, because it's infinitely better than not taking that step. So whether it be getting in touch with someone like me, doing my boot camp, reading up on your options, like whatever it is. But I feel like a lot of people, and I mean, to be honest, a lot of people are usually better off than they think they are. I sit down in front of a lot of people who are just like, oh my God, Galen, I'm so embarrassed. I've been a doctor for 20 years and I don't have enough money saved up. And like, they're just like freaking out. And I'm like, well, you're doing it now. Like, second best time to plant a tree is today. And, and usually people aren't as bad off as they think. Usually there's a lot more that they can do than they realize. And so I'll leave that as the final parting.
That is great. I appreciate that. And listeners, I hope you took some value with today's show and our money conversation. And if you want to follow up and connect with Galen a little bit more, be sure to check out the show notes. There'll be lots of information there, including links to the bootcamp. And a pleasure to see you again and chat with you today. And have a great rest of your afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.